I was living in Northern Virginia at the time, and I had two small children. Nicholas was 5 and Kimberly was 2 years old. And I was just at home doing my normal thing. And John had called to say that he was coming home because there was an attack on the Pentagon. And I turned on the TV and saw that the Twin Towers, one of the towers was, an airplane had flown through the tower and it was burning. And just watching the newscaster talking about it, and it wasn't long before the second airplane came and hit the second tower, and I was very shocked, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the television. The first person I talked to was John when he came home from the Pentagon, because he was near the Pentagon, and the Pentagon was being attacked by terrorists. We were talking about what had happened, and he told me his day and the progression of that he was there, and there was a huge attack on the Pentagon, and everyone was fleeing, and traffic was really bad leaving the city. So he was probably the first person that I spoke to. And then hours later, I spoke with neighbors, and we talked about that day and just how it was unbelievable that we can't believe that someone would attack in the United States. As a mom, I would say the biggest change that affected me is the traveling at the airport, that there was just more things that we had to take precaution with, taking off our shoes and going through tighter security. It wasn't quite as easy going through security as it was the day before 9/11.
On September 11th, I had a meeting with two of my colleagues in Georgetown, which is part of Washington, D.C. And we met before our meeting at a coffee shop, a cafe in Georgetown around 8:30 or so. And while we were preparing for our meeting, we saw on the news that one of the World Trade Center towers was burning at the top. At the time, no one really knew exactly what had happened. There were some rumors that maybe a small plane had hit that tower. So shortly after that, I don't remember how much later, maybe 20 minutes or so, while the coverage was on the first tower incident, the plane hit the second World Trade Center tower. And as soon as I saw that happen, I knew that there was terrorism involved, because something like that is incredibly unlikely to happen. And then we started seeing this large plume of smoke coming up into the sky from the area where the Pentagon was. And shortly after that, there was a news item that came over the radio, I guess, that said that the Pentagon had been attacked. No one was really exactly sure what had happened. So at that point, we decided to cancel our meeting and leave downtown. So that was a quite unforgettable series of events that morning. I guess when we first heard the news, when I was in that cafe, that the first tower had been hit, it was more of a response of just kind of surprise. We didn't really know what had happened, so it's just like, okay, it's a news item, some smoke coming from the top of the tower, so hopefully people get out. We weren't really paying too much attention to it. But as soon as that second tower was hit, there was this immediate reaction that I knew that something bad was going on, and that there was probably a terrorist attack involved. So that element of surprise turned very quickly into an element of just anger, and you immediately want to find out who did when I left D.C. to head back home after the Pentagon was hit, I drove across one of the bridges that had a straight view to the side of the Pentagon, and I'll never forget the smoke that was rising from the side of the Pentagon as I was going across that bridge. I could see right into where that plane had hit, and an image like that you just don't forget. I can still see that in my mind to this day. I was very, very upset. And at that point, you didn't know whether things were going to continue. You just had a lot of uncertainty about what the rest of the day was going to look like. And when I got home, our neighborhood was kind of eerily quiet. I got home, I went in and greeted my wife, son, and our son Nicholas was probably about 4 and a half years old. Our daughter Kimberly was about 2. And at that point, what we started to hear outside were really loud jets flying overhead. These were military jets, very loud to begin with, and they were flying really fast. There was zero commercial air traffic up in the sky, but you could see fighter jets just flying back and forth. At one point you saw some of the large fuel tanker airplanes flying around. I guess they were refueling aircraft. And my son Nicholas had learned to fly an airplane on a flight simulator program. And he asked me his question as we were watching TV. He said, well, how could someone take an airplane, fly it into a building? Don't they know how to get around a building? Because I know how to do that, Daddy. And I had to explain to him then that there were some people who were trying to hurt our country by intentionally flying airplanes into these buildings. So at that point we turned off the TV and we just kind of went outside, and we got to see all the other dads in the neighborhood were coming home. And later on in the day is when you started to see people pulling out flags that were probably in the garage or in the basement from July 4th, only about 2 months before, and they were starting to put them on the lawn or attaching them to their house. And there was just a sense of surprise, a little bit of fear, a lot of anger at what was going on, worry about what might still happen. But there was already this sense of people starting to come together and just share the common bond of patriotism and love for their country. So those are some of the things that stand out to me the most about that day. I guess there have been a lot of changes since 9/11. Some of those changes were more immediate, and some probably took longer to occur. I guess the most immediate changes I remember was the fact that everyone came together. There was a huge amount of patriotism in a very short amount of time, and it was neat to see that happen in our country, even though it was sad to see that it was a result of something bad that happened. And I think some of the longer term changes that have occurred are related to our seeming desire for safety and security, and the fact that we're giving up freedom to do that. And I think it was Ben Franklin who said something along the lines of, those who are willing to trade freedom for safety don't deserve either thing. And I think that's an unfortunate result of what's happened after 9/11, because all of us have lost some amount of personal security. It takes us a lot longer to go through security screening at the airport. We all have become used to the fact that our government is going to be somehow scanning our emails or listening to phone calls or keeping track of what we do. And if something like that had happened 30 or 40 years ago without any event like 9/11, think there would be very little acceptance or tolerance for that within our country. But because of an event like 9/11, I think that our country has maybe somewhat subconsciously given up a lot of freedom, a lot of rights, and especially privacy rights that we used to take for granted, and we've willingly given those up to have some measure of safety.